It's schools out across the south as teachers head to picket lines to protest over pay.
It's an incredibly difficult decision. We want to be in the classroom, we want to be teaching, we want to be with our young people, but we teach them to make a stand and to stand up for injustice.
For many children, it meant a day at home or in specially arranged childcare. We find out how families fared. It's the first of 4 days of industrial action planned by teachers unless there's a resolution. Good evening, I'm Anjana Gadgil. There's been a day of widespread disruption across the south, with school teachers, university staff, train drivers and border officials striking in disputes over pay. It's the teachers' strike that's had the biggest impact, with the majority of state schools affected and many closed completely. Members of the National Education Union said they didn't want to strike, but they had no choice but to stand up for the future of education. In a moment, we'll hear from the Education Minister. But first, let's get a flavour of the concerns of teachers on picket lines and rallies across the south. Here's Bryony Leyland.
First light in Alresford near Winchester, the first time on a picket line for some teachers. Many say walking out of classrooms has been a hard decision.
I know there are teachers here who have had a sleepless night last night, wondering whether they should do this. We want to be in the classroom, we want to be teaching, we want to be with our young people.
National Education Union members carried their message through Winchester, voicing their demands for an above-inflation pay rise. Similar scenes were mirrored around the south.
I am so proud.
This was Swindon, and this picket was at the Thomas Hardy School in Dorchester.
What do we want? School funding!
But the Cheney School in Oxford calls for more money for schools to fund pay rises.
Teachers' pay in real terms has been falling over the last decade, and this has led to a serious recruitment crisis and retention crisis within schools.
In Southampton, teachers from primary and secondary schools came together, among them science teacher John Triggs, who teaches at Redbridge Community School.
My younger colleagues are really struggling. Some of them think about getting second jobs, some of them think about giving up teaching and doing other things which would earn more with less stress. We're all doing more work, and eventually we are going to crack unless something is done.
The head teacher at John's school said with more than half his staff on strike, he had no choice but to close to most. Just 9 vulnerable children were in school today.
It is very disruptive. Post-COVID, we're still battling some of those issues left over from COVID, like attendance, that every school's having issues with. And this just puts a big block. It is very disruptive, but that is the purpose of a strike, is to be disruptive.
Are you supportive of the strike?
I got mixed feelings. I know that teachers are good, caring people. I would always urge all parties to get around the table and try and find a negotiation.
Round the corner at the local shops, we met parents who juggled childcare to cope with today's strike.
I do get it, but at the same time, we're not allowed to take them out of school for holidays.
I think a lot of people think they get all these time off during the holidays, but they really don't. They do stuff that behind the scenes that we don't see as parents. So absolutely, they deserve better pay, better conditions.
If it's just one day, it's not too bad, but if it continues, it will have a big impact on their education.
This dispute is far from over. The government insists above-inflation pay rises would harm the economy.
Many teachers here said they don't want to strike, they would rather be teaching. But if resolution isn't reached, they will be back with more rallies and picket lines on strike days planned for March the 2nd, the 15th and 16th. Bryony Leyland, BBC South Today in Southampton.
Of course, today's teacher strikes had an impact on parents, especially those who work. Some had to take a day off and lose pay themselves, which is why a church in Winchester wanted to help, running a youth club and giving children a free, safe place to hang out. We filmed there, and also with a family who would have needed childcare had it not been that Dad was also on strike in a different dispute. Here's Michelle Cross.
It's a drop-in youth group with a bit of a difference here today to ease the pressure for parents.
One of our parents told me just yesterday that they were really happy that we were running a place where their young person wouldn't have to be on their own.
Christchurch in Winchester has been delivering its special youth sessions during the day today.
The main reason that we're doing this is because we know that it's great for young people to be in a community. They can be playing games, they can be gaming, they can do their work if they want to, so there's a quieter space for that, or they can get hot chocolates, definitely with cream and marshmallows today.
It's been so helpful. My daughter comes along to the youth group here on a Thursday evening, so she knows the space, and it just means that she's got somewhere warm and safe to come and to be with her friends.
The facility's great, and it's certainly very helpful to have somewhere for my son to come. My wife is actually a teacher, so I have a lot of sympathy. I think the teachers work very hard, and not just the teachers, but the TAs, who are paid particularly badly, I think.
And every working parent has a different story.
My name's Simon Boxley and I'm a lecturer at the University of Winchester, but I'm also a parent. You sure you don't need anything? I'm looking after 2 of my 4 children today because their schools are affected by today's actions.
Simon joined the demonstration in Winchester today with his youngest daughter.
It's not that we wanted to go on strike today or any day, it's just that we've got to the point really where we feel after years and years over a decade our pay eroding, that the prospect of yet another real terms pay cut is just intolerable. In my union, UCU, we're looking at 18 days of strike action. With the offer that's currently on the table for the employer, we're looking at 40 or 50 days less pay next year in real terms. So, you know, we feel like we can't afford not to.
Do you have sympathy for other parents who've had to take the day off work today as a result of today's strike action?
As a parent, I can absolutely see the dilemma here. It's a real problem because many people will be faced with some loss of pay themselves for having to look after their children, but the whole economy is being affected, wages held down across the board, and I've never felt more strongly than I do now.
With more strike dates planned, that's more uncertainty for all ahead. Michelle Cross, BBC South Today.
So a real struggle for lots of parents today, and we'd be interested in hearing whether you've been affected by the strikes and what your thoughts are on the action that teachers and others are taking. You can email us right now. Our address is south.today@bbc.co.uk, or you can tweet @BBC South News. The address is right there, and our team is standing by to read what you have to say. Right, let's get some political reaction now with our political editor, Peter Henley. Now, Peter, these strikes have affected more people than ever before. So is it making a difference to the government?
Yeah, it's moved beyond the impact of the rail and the health to families. You saw children there, you know, preparing placards and lots of parents who are very much affected today. Their lives completely disrupted. So there's this sense that things are spreading. Will that affect public opinion? I spoke to the Health Secretary and Sussex MP Gillian Keegan, asked her if she was worried about the safety of children who had to stay away from school today.
There will be some children who sadly will be at home today. It's very disruptive for parents and for children, and you know, this on top of everything they've had to endure during the pandemic, it's deeply disappointing.
So do you want to apologise to parents who've got to stay at home or who are worried about their children at home because they couldn't stay with them?
Well, no, I think the unions should apologise probably to parents, but I think what I'm doing is making sure that I do everything I can to try and have constructive discussions with the unions.
But you've been in business, you know if both sides are willing, a deal can always be done. It's a failure not to have done a deal.
Well, actually, at the meeting on Monday, which was constructive, they basically said, look, there's no way the strike can be called off on Wednesday. This strike's going ahead. There's a lot of people that
You're suggesting they would have liked to have called it off and settled?
No, I think they, at the moment, are still sort of stuck on the inflation or inflation-busting pay rise. But what I have said is I very much will work to recruit, ensure we attract, you know, the best graduates into teaching, to make sure we retain teachers, look at workload, look at flexibilities, look at behaviour, look at special educational needs, all the things that we need to do better. But there's no way that it would be reasonable for us to, you know, pay inflation or inflation-busting pay rises for some sectors of our economy, which would make inflation stay for everybody for longer.
And what do you say to head teachers who have managed to keep a school going and got the kids in today?
Thank you for everything you're doing. They know how important it is. Our children have suffered way too much during the pandemic. Every day, everybody's trying to help them catch up. We've still got more to do there. Today is an important part of that journey as well. Thank you for everything you're doing.
And you're hoping there aren't more strikes?
I am hoping there aren't more strikes. This strike was not a last resort. The conversations were carrying on. This did not need to happen. It is not a last resort, and that's why I don't think that there was much to do to avoid this strike.
The Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan there. And Peter, the government's main reason for not increasing the pay of teachers or health workers or rail workers is that they have to hold back inflation. So how is that argument holding up now?
It's a difficult one because they've put up the pension in line with inflation. The government's getting more money in from taxes and VAT. So are they actually having to break this vicious cycle? If they paid the teachers more, would that put up inflation? These strikes are political because the unions on the other side are not just arguing over this year's pay deal, they're talking about years of investment going back. So the only way that either side can come out claiming a victory from this is some of the small things for next year's pay deal, as we heard being outlined there.
Peter, thank you very much. Well, away from the strikes, there's plenty more in tonight's programme.